A cruel alien society rejected her and her children, but a human gave them a second chance. The alien woman, named Lyra, had once lived in a city that gleamed under the twin suns of her planet. Its towers were tall and shining, its streets always busy with alien citizens who followed strict rules passed down through countless generations. Lyra had believed, as everyone did, that strength and perfection were the greatest virtues, that only those who could keep up with the society's high standards would be respected and cared for. For many years, she had been proud of her place in that world. She had a home, friends, and a mate who promised to stand by her through every trial. Her life, while not perfect, had been safe, predictable, and full of small joys. But everything changed the day her mate died. His passing was sudden and left her alone with two small children who were not like the others. They were weaker than average, smaller and slower, and the Council of Elders looked at them with cold disapproval. In this alien society, weakness was a burden and imperfection was not tolerated. The Council's judgment was clear. Lyra and her children were no longer worthy of their place in the city. They could not stay. They could not belong. The society she had once respected, the one she had trusted to protect her and her family, now turned its back without hesitation. Lyra remembered the day the notice came. The message was delivered by two officials in sleek black uniforms, their faces hidden behind reflective masks that never revealed a single emotion. They spoke in the clipped, formal language of authority, leaving no room for argument. Your children do not meet the standards required for residence. You are hereby expelled. Take what you can carry and leave. No further assistance will be provided. There was no question of compromise, no chance to appeal. Their words were final, and the weight of them sank into Lyra like stones tied to her chest. Neighbors who had once smiled at her in passing now avoided her. Children who had played alongside hers were called back inside by their parents. Even merchants in the marketplace shook their heads, refusing to trade with her. Everything that had once been ordinary, a greeting, a shared meal, a smile, was now gone. Lyra felt the cold edge of loneliness settle deep into her bones. She carried her children home that night, their small hands gripping hers tightly, eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Why won't anyone help us, Mother?" her youngest whispered, her voice trembling. Lyra had no answer. She could only hold them close, trying to shield them from the harsh world outside. Her home, once a place of warmth and security, now felt like a trap. The council had sealed it, declaring that she had 48 hours to leave. Lyra gathered what little she could carry, a small bundle of clothing, a few tools, and some dried food she hoped would last the journey. Her children clutched small trinkets, one a carved stone their father had given them, the other a tiny toy she had made by hand. Every object seemed precious now because it was all they had left. As she stepped outside, the city felt enormous and unwelcoming. The streets were wide and silent, and the towering buildings cast long shadows that seemed to stretch like fingers, pointing at them as if to say, "You do not belong." The journey away from the city was not easy. Lyra led her children through narrow alleys and over empty streets, avoiding patrols that might force them back. They carried only what they could, so every step was heavy. Nights were cold under the twin moons, and she wrapped her children in the thin blankets they had managed to save. She whispered stories of better times, of a life before the council's judgment, hoping her words would give them courage. But even as she spoke, doubt gnawed at her. She had nowhere to go. The world outside the city was unknown and dangerous, filled with predators, harsh weather, and other aliens who might not treat them kindly. The fear of the unknown pressed down on her like the weight of the dark sky above. Despite the hardships, Lyra did not give up. She had to survive not just for herself, but for her children. They looked to her for guidance, and she knew that showing fear would only make them more afraid. She taught them how to move quietly, how to find food and water, and how to listen to the world around them. She showed them which plants were safe to eat, which streams were clean, and how to avoid the creatures that lurked in the shadows. Each day was a lesson in survival, each night a test of endurance. Her children learned quickly, following her every instruction, their small faces set with determination even when exhaustion weighed on them. As days passed, Lyra began to understand that the alien society she had once trusted was not just cruel, but blind. It had no mercy for those who did not fit its narrow definition of worth. She realized that she could not change their minds, could not make them see her children's potential or their value. The city had rejected them because of appearances, because of weakness, and because conformity was more important than compassion. It was a painful truth, but one she could not ignore. Acceptance would not come from the council. If her family was to survive, it would be somewhere far from the shining towers and cold judgment. The children, despite their small size and lack of strength, showed resilience that surprised even Lyra. Her eldest, a boy named Kalen, began to take responsibility for gathering firewood and watching over his younger sibling. Her youngest, a girl named Myra, though timid at first, learned to carry small loads and identify edible plants. Lyra watched them grow stronger in ways the council could not measure. Strength, she realized, was not just physical. It was courage, it was intelligence, it was heart. Her children had all of these in abundance, even if their society had refused to see it. But life outside the city was not without danger. Storms came with little warning, tearing through the sparse trees and whipping the dust into their faces. Predators prowled in the night, and strangers were not always friendly. Lyra learned to move with caution, to set traps for small game, and to find shelter in caves or abandoned buildings. Every day was a battle, every night a test of her determination. She also carried an invisible weight, the pain of rejection. Her mind often wandered to the city she had lost. She remembered the laughter of neighbors, the festivals, the comfort of familiar streets. Now those memories were like ghosts, reminding her of what had been taken and what could never return. Even in the harshest moments, Lyra never gave her children reason to despair. She hugged them tightly at night, whispered promises of better days, and encouraged them to find joy in small things. A flower blooming in the dust, a bird singing at dawn, the warmth of the sun on their faces. She taught them songs from their homeland, stories of heroes who had faced impossible odds, and lessons in kindness that the world outside seemed to forget. In teaching them, she also reminded herself of her own worth. She was still a mother, a protector, and a teacher. Her family was still a family, no matter what the council had said. As they moved further from the city, they encountered other aliens. Some ignored them, some mocked them, and some were openly hostile. Each encounter was a test of Lyra's courage and patience. She had to balance protecting her children with avoiding unnecessary conflict. Sometimes she wished for the city walls for safety and certainty, but she knew that returning was impossible. The council's decision was final, and the citizens had already turned their backs. She realized that survival depended not on others' approval, but on her own strength and the bond she shared with her children. Every day, as they walked under the twin suns, Lyra felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps, somewhere beyond the borders of their old life, there was a place where they could belong, a place where strength was measured not only by perfection, but by heart and courage. Lyra also discovered that her own resilience was greater than she had imagined. The first days of expulsion had been filled with despair, tears, and exhaustion, but she adapted. She learned to find hidden water sources, to read the stars for direction, and to create makeshift shelters from whatever materials she could find. Her children's laughter, small as it was, became a source of energy, a reminder that life could still be beautiful even in hardship. The bond between mother and children grew stronger with each challenge. They were not just surviving, they were learning to thrive even in a world that had rejected them. By the end of the first month, Lyra had begun to see her situation differently. Yes, they were alone, and yes, their society had turned its back. But in this loneliness, she found freedom. She no longer had to follow rules that punished her for circumstances beyond her control. She could make her own choices, teach her children her own values, and build a life defined not by rejection, but by care, courage, and love. Each day, they moved forward, leaving behind the city that had once seemed like the center of the world. And though the future was uncertain, Lyra knew that as long as they had each other, they could face anything. Lyra had been living outside the city for several weeks now, and each day tested her in ways she had never imagined. The world beyond the shining towers was harsh, empty in many places, and full of dangers she had only heard about as a child. The terrain changed constantly, sometimes rocky hills with sharp stones cutting through her thin shoes, sometimes dusty plains where the wind seemed to sting her face, and sometimes forests with twisted trees that seemed alive in the moonlight. Every step she took was careful, not just for her own safety, but for the tiny lives she carried with her everywhere she went. Food was never easy to find. The little she had brought from the city ran out quickly. Lyra learned to identify roots and berries that could be eaten without making her children sick. She taught them which small animals were safe to catch, how to set simple traps, and how to store what they had to last longer. Her eldest, Kalen, was quick to learn. He was careful and patient, watching his mother closely before attempting anything on his own. Myra, the younger one, was shy at first, afraid of the small creatures and wary of stepping into the unknown. But Lyra never scolded them. She guided them with gentle words, repeating lessons over and over until they understood. The nights were the hardest. In the city, nights had always been safe, filled with familiar sounds and warm lights. Outside, darkness was a living thing. Strange creatures prowled silently, and the shadows of the trees seemed to move when no wind blew. Lyra had to keep her children close, holding them under the thin blankets she had managed to save. Sometimes she whispered stories to them to keep their spirits up, stories of their father and the city they had lost. Other times, she simply held them and let the silence speak, listening for any sound that might signal danger. One evening, as they settled in a small cave for shelter, Lyra noticed footprints leading toward their temporary home. Her heart beat faster. She could not tell if it was a predator or another alien traveler. Slowly, she woke Kalen and Myra, whispering instructions. "Stay behind me, do not make a sound, and wait until I tell you to run." The footprints grew closer, crunching over the dry leaves outside. Lyra picked up a long stick and stood at the entrance, her body tense, ready to defend her children. A pair of small alien scavengers appeared, looking for food. They hissed and circled, curious but not immediately aggressive. Lyra stayed calm, holding the stick in front of her. After several tense moments, the creatures turned and disappeared into the forest. Kalen and Myra exhaled softly, realizing that their mother's courage had saved them once again. Even when danger was not present, other challenges came quickly. Rainstorms would flood their temporary shelters, leaving them cold and wet. Food sometimes spoiled faster than expected, forcing them to move on before they were fully prepared. Lyra often went without sleep, staying awake to listen for predators or to think of ways to improve their small life. She knew she could not give up, no matter how tired or hopeless she felt. Her children depended on her and every small success. Finding a clean stream, trapping a rabbit, keeping dry in a storm, was a victory worth celebrating. Despite these hardships, there were moments of quiet beauty. The sun rising over the hills painted the sky in colors she had not noticed in years. Birds sang strange melodies she had never heard before, and the scent of wild flowers sometimes drifted into the caves and forests where they stayed. Lyra tried to make her children notice these small wonders, pointing out a butterfly, a blooming bush, or a sparkling stream. She believed that even in a world that rejected them, life could still hold joy if they chose to see it. Slowly, her children began to smile more often, laughing at small things, chasing after insects, and asking questions about the stars above. Their curiosity reminded Lyra of hope she had almost forgotten. One morning, as they traveled across a narrow valley, they encountered another alien family. Lyra approached cautiously, holding her children close. The other family looked at them and shook their heads, refusing to share water or food. One of them even spat on the ground near Lyra's feet. The message was clear: "You do not belong here either." Lyra's chest tightened, but she forced herself to keep moving. She could not let anger or despair stop them. She whispered to Kalen and Myra, "Remember who we are. Remember that we are strong, even when others do not see it." Her children nodded, learning from her strength and determination. As the days turned into weeks, Lyra noticed changes in herself and her children. They had grown stronger, not just physically, but in spirit. Kalen could now climb trees to gather fruit, set traps for small animals, and navigate the forest with confidence. Myra had learned to carry water, identify edible plants, and even start small fires using dry twigs and stones. Their teamwork amazed Lyra. They began to look out for each other, sharing the little food they caught, helping each other over obstacles and comforting one another during storms. The family was becoming a unit, bonded not just by love, but by survival. Lyra also realized that she could teach them more than survival skills. She told them stories from their past, not just to entertain, but to give them lessons. She spoke of courage, kindness, and patience. She explained that life was not always fair, and that sometimes people would reject them without reason. But she also told them that their value did not come from society's approval. "We are strong because we care," she said one night as they sat around a small fire. "We are strong because we do not give up, even when the world says we should. That is what makes us special." Her words sank deep into the children's hearts, giving them confidence that they would carry forward. Some days were quieter, filled with simple tasks, gathering food, cleaning their small shelter, and walking carefully through the hills. Lyra found that in these moments, she could think about the future. She wondered if there was a place far from the city where her children would be safe, where they could live without fear. She dreamed of a home with friends who cared for them, with neighbors who would help instead of turning away. The thought gave her strength to keep going, even when the journey was exhausting. Every small step forward was a step toward that hope, but the journey was not without emotional struggle. Lyra often found herself thinking about the life they had lost. She missed the city streets, the lights, and the sense of belonging. She missed friends who had once smiled at her and neighbors who had once nodded kindly. She even missed the small routines that had seemed ordinary, buying fresh bread, listening to children's laughter in the streets, or attending public ceremonies with her family. She mourned these losses quietly, sharing her sadness with Kaylin and Myra when they asked questions. She wanted them to understand that it was normal to feel grief, and that feeling it did not make them weak. Over time, Lyra also learned to trust her instincts more. She became skilled at reading the environment, noticing changes in the wind, the movement of animals, and the sounds of distant creatures. This awareness helped them avoid danger and find resources that others might miss. Her children began to notice these details as well. Kaylin could spot a fresh water source from afar, and Myra could sense when the wind indicated an approaching storm. Together, they were learning to survive, even thrive in a world that had rejected them. Despite all the hardships, Lyra never stopped teaching her children the values that mattered most. She emphasized kindness, patience, and courage. She taught them to share, to help others when possible, and to speak politely even to those who treated them poorly. "Strength is not just muscle," she told Kaylin one day as he helped Myra across a rocky stream. "Strength is how you carry yourself when no one is watching. Strength is how you treat others, even when it is hard." These lessons were slow to take root, but she knew they were planting seeds that would grow into lifelong habits. As the sun set on another day, Lyra looked at her children and felt a mix of exhaustion and pride. They had walked farther than she had imagined, faced dangers that would have frightened them at first, and learned to care for each other and themselves. The journey was far from over, but each day brought them closer to the possibility of safety and acceptance somewhere beyond the reach of their cruel society. Lyra held Myra and Kaylin close, whispering promises of better days, even though the path ahead remained uncertain. She knew that as long as they stayed together, they could survive anything. And in the quiet moments before sleep, when the wind rustled the trees and distant creatures called in the night, she allowed herself to hope. Lyra and her children had been traveling for several weeks since leaving the harsh alien city. The landscape outside was strange and ever-changing. Sometimes wide plains that stretched endlessly, sometimes forests so dense that light barely reached the ground, and sometimes rivers that had to be crossed carefully to avoid being swept away. Life was hard, and every day was filled with challenges that tested Lyra's strength, courage, and patience. But through it all, her bond with Kaylin and Myra grew stronger. They relied on each other, shared small joys, and learned the true meaning of family in a world that had rejected them. One bright morning, as they were crossing a gentle slope covered in golden grass, Lyra noticed a small figure in the distance. At first, she thought it might be another alien traveler, someone who could be dangerous. Her hand instinctively went to her side, where she carried a small stick for protection. Kaylin and Myra noticed her tension and fell silently behind her, trusting her instinct without question. The figure came closer, and Lyra could see that it was unlike any alien she had ever encountered. This being had a different shape, different colors, and walked with a calm confidence that did not belong to the harsh world she knew. It was a human. Lyra's first reaction was caution. Humans were known to trade across the stars, but she had heard stories of those who took advantage of vulnerable travelers. She pulled her children close and studied the human carefully. The stranger noticed them, paused, and raised a hand in a gesture that seemed peaceful, almost friendly. Lyra's heart beat faster. She did not know if this was an opportunity or a trap. For a long moment, neither moved, and the wind seemed to hold its breath along with them. Finally, the human spoke in a soft voice that carried across the grass. "Hello, you look like you could use some help." The words were strange to Lyra, not just because of the tone, but because they carried a kindness she had not heard in weeks. It was almost unbelievable that someone would offer aid without judgment or demand. She looked at her children and saw their wide eyes, filled with curiosity and fear. She decided to respond cautiously. "We are fine," she said, her voice firm but calm. "We can manage." The human smiled gently and nodded. "I will not force anything. I just want to offer food and water, no strings attached." Lyra hesitated. Her society had taught her that outsiders were dangerous and that kindness often had hidden motives. Yet something in this human's calm eyes made her pause. The honesty seemed real, almost as if it could be trusted. Slowly, she allowed Kaelin and Myra to step forward. The human reached into a bag and offered a small bundle of fruit and water. "Eat," the human said. "You must be tired." The children stared at the gift, their hands trembling slightly, and then accepted it. Lyra watched them, feeling a warmth she had not experienced in weeks. The small act of generosity felt like sunlight after a long, dark storm. Over the next few days, the human remained near them, not imposing but offering help whenever it seemed needed. Lyra observed him carefully, still unsure if she could trust him fully. But she also noticed the small ways in which he cared. He helped them cross a fast-moving stream by finding a safe path, showed Kaelin how to identify edible plants that were not harmful, and helped Myra tie a bandage when she scraped her knee. Each act was small, but together they created a sense of safety that Lyra had almost forgotten existed. Slowly, she began to let her guard down, just enough to allow hope to enter her heart. One afternoon, as they rested under the shade of a tree, Lyra finally spoke to the human about their journey. "We were cast out," she said quietly. "The council of our city rejected us. They said my children are not strong enough, not worthy of living in their society." The human listened without interrupting, nodding slowly. When she finished, he said, "I can't imagine how hard that must be. No one should be judged only by what others expect of them." His words were simple, but they carried understanding, and for the first time, Lyra felt seen, not as a weak mother, not as an outcast, but as a person who deserved care. The children grew curious about the human. Kaelin, always observant, asked many questions. "Why are you helping us?" he asked one morning, his eyes serious. The human knelt to meet him at eye level and smiled. "Because everyone deserves a chance," he replied. "Because you are alive, and alive people can do amazing things if they are given support." Myra, shyer than her brother, nodded slowly. She seemed to understand that this human did not see them as a burden, as the city had, but as beings worth protecting. Lyra watched them, her heart full of cautious hope. Perhaps, she thought, this was the first step toward a new life. Life with the human was not without challenges. He could not stay with them constantly, and the journey remained difficult. There were still storms to face, rivers to cross, and food to gather. But his presence made the hardships lighter. He shared knowledge of the land, teaching them how to find fresh water, where to hide from dangerous predators, and how to move quietly to avoid attracting attention. He also taught them ways to make life easier, like building temporary shelters that could protect them from rain and wind. These lessons were practical, but they also carried something deeper, the idea that someone cared, that survival did not have to be lonely. Lyra began to see changes in her children that filled her with pride. Kaelin's confidence grew as he learned new skills from the human. He began to take the lead in small tasks, such as gathering firewood or scouting ahead for food. Myra became braver, learning to climb trees and help her mother carry supplies. Both children started to smile more, laugh more, and ask more questions about the world around them. The human treated them gently, never scolding or forcing them, and they responded with trust. Slowly, a sense of stability began to replace the constant fear that had filled their lives since leaving the city. One evening, as the sun set behind distant hills, Lyra sat with the human and spoke about her hopes and fears. "I have been running for weeks," she said, "but I do not know where we can truly belong. My society rejected us, and sometimes I fear we will never find a place that welcomes us." The human listened patiently, then said, "There are always places where kindness and fairness exist." You may not have found them yet, but they are out there, and now you are not alone." Lyra felt tears fill her eyes. For so long, she had believed that rejection was all there was. Now, for the first time, hope felt real. The human also helped Lyra think about the future in practical ways. He suggested safe routes they could take, areas where they could find food more reliably, and places to rest without fear of predators or hostile aliens. He taught Kaelin and Myra about simple survival strategies, always encouraging them to ask questions and try things for themselves. This approach allowed the children to gain confidence and independence while still feeling protected. Lyra realized that this guidance was not just helpful, it was life-changing. She had spent so long in survival mode, but now she could start thinking about life beyond mere survival. As the days passed, Lyra noticed that her own fears began to fade. She still worried, of course, but she also felt a growing sense of possibility. She could imagine a future where her children were safe, educated, and happy. She could imagine a life where rejection and cruelty did not define her family. And she could imagine a world where kindness was possible, even in a place that had seemed so harsh and unforgiving. The human never demanded anything in return, never judged her for her past, and never minimized the pain they had endured. His presence reminded her that people could be good, even in a universe that often seemed cruel. One morning, as they prepared to continue their journey, Kaelin turned to his mother and asked, "Mother, do you think there are other people like him?" "People who would help us," Lyra smiled softly and nodded. "Yes," she said. "There are kind people out there. We have been lucky to find one, but there are more. And one day, we may find a place where all of us can belong." Myra clutched her hand tightly, and Lyra felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in many weeks, she felt that survival was not just about enduring, it was about moving toward something better. The journey continued with a new energy. The human traveled with them as far as he could, offering guidance and teaching them skills to navigate the terrain. He helped them build a temporary shelter near a small stream, showed them which plants were safe to eat, and taught them how to signal for help if needed. Each lesson reinforced not only practical survival skills, but also the idea that they could trust others again. Lyra saw her children grow more confident, more curious, and more hopeful with each passing day. Eventually, the human had to leave, promising to return if he could. Lyra watched him go with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. His presence had changed their lives, given them hope, and shown them that kindness existed beyond the cruel world they had left behind. She turned to her children and said, "We have been given a chance, not by our society, but by someone who believed in us. Now it is up to us to keep moving forward." Kaelin and Myra nodded, understanding the importance of this moment. They were no longer just survivors. They were travelers with purpose, carrying hope in their hearts as they faced the unknown. After the human had left, Lyra felt both hope and uncertainty. He had guided them for a while, shown them that kindness existed outside the cruel alien city, and given them tools to survive. Yet the world was still vast, and dangers were everywhere. She held Myra and Kaelin close as they walked through hills and forests, careful to avoid predators and unstable terrain. But Lyra's heart carried a quiet determination. She would find a place where her children could live safely, a place where rejection was not the law and where their lives could matter. Weeks passed, and the landscape slowly changed. The harsh deserts and rocky plains gave way to softer lands filled with streams, gentle hills, and open meadows. Birds sang in the trees, and small animals moved cautiously through the grass. Lyra noticed the change, and a small smile formed on her face. For the first time, she could imagine a life that felt less like constant survival and more like possibility. Kaelin and Myra ran ahead, laughing as they chased each other across the fields. Lyra watched them, feeling a warmth that she hadn't known in months. Their laughter was like music, and she realized that for the first time in a long while, they could truly begin to heal. It was during one of these days, as the sun was rising in the sky, that Lyra spotted signs of human civilization in the distance. Smoke rose gently from chimneys, and small structures with curved roofs dotted the hills. Her heart skipped a beat. Could this be a safe place? She approached cautiously, leading her children carefully through the tall grass, always aware of the need to remain hidden until she understood who lived there. As they got closer, they saw humans walking about, tending to gardens, building simple structures, and helping one another. There was no sense of rush, no harsh judgment. Everything about this place felt calm, welcoming, and alive with quiet energy. A human working in a garden noticed them and waved. "Hello, are you lost?" the stranger called, smiling warmly. Lyra froze for a moment, unsure of what to do, but Kalen stepped forward, brave despite his small size. We need help," he said softly. Lyra nodded behind him. The human immediately understood and offered them food, water, and a place to rest. It was the first time since leaving their city that someone had offered them help without hesitation or judgment. Myra clung to Lyra's side, her eyes wide with wonder at the kindness she was seeing. Lyra felt tears prick her eyes. They had finally found a place that seemed safe. The humans guided them into the settlement and offered them a small home to stay in temporarily. Lyra could not stop looking around. Gardens filled with colorful plants, children laughing together, and people helping one another. It was unlike anything she had experienced in the alien city. There were rules here, yes, but they were fair, and they were meant to protect everyone, not punish the weak. Lyra felt a sense of relief that she had not known in months. She could finally imagine a future where her children would grow up with care, education, and safety. The first few days were full of adjustment. Lyra's children had never seen so many humans before, and they were cautious. Kalen asked many questions about the rules, the people, and how life worked here. Myra stayed close to Lyra, slowly observing the world around her. Lyra herself felt a mixture of excitement and fear. She had been rejected by her own society, and the memory of that pain lingered. But here, in this place, she saw that kindness could exist, and that trust could be rebuilt slowly, one act at a time. The humans helped them settle, teaching them how to grow food, gather water safely, and live among others who respected one another. Lyra watched her children begin to thrive. Kalen quickly took an interest in helping with construction and gardening, learning skills he had never imagined he would have. Myra, shy at first, began attending classes designed for children new to the settlement, learning to read, write, and explore safely. Lyra was amazed at how quickly they adapted. They were no longer just surviving, they were beginning to live. As days turned into weeks, Lyra found a sense of purpose she had almost forgotten. She began helping in the settlement as well, using her skills to assist with food preparation and simple repairs. The humans respected her work, and she found pride in being able to contribute. For the first time in months, she felt like a valued member of a community. She noticed her own strength returning, not just in her body, but in her mind and spirit. She was no longer only a mother fighting for survival. She was a person with skills, knowledge, and value beyond the rejection she had endured. The children continued to grow in confidence and joy. Kalen made friends with other children in the settlement, learning teamwork, problem-solving, and how to care for others. Myra began to laugh more freely, participating in games and learning to express her thoughts and feelings without fear. Lyra watched them, her heart swelling with pride. She realized that the kindness of a single human traveler had opened the door to this new life. Without him, they might still be wandering, lost and alone. One evening, as the family sat together after a long day, Lyra reflected on how much had changed. The memory of the alien city still lingered. She could not forget the way the council had turned them away. But she no longer felt trapped by it. Instead, she felt a sense of gratitude for the second chance she had been given. She held Myra close and looked at Kalen, thinking of the future that now seemed possible. "We have been given a new life," she whispered. "It is up to us to make it meaningful." Her children nodded, understanding the importance of her words. They had faced rejection, danger, and fear, but now they had hope and a place to grow. Lyra also realized that trust could be rebuilt, slowly and carefully. She had learned not to expect kindness from everyone, but here, among these humans, she saw that empathy, fairness, and respect could shape an entire community. She began to teach Kalen and Myra that the values she had instilled in them, courage, kindness, and patience, were not just survival tools, but ways to thrive in a world where people could support one another. She told them that the cruelty of the past did not define them, and that the future could be brighter if they carried love and courage forward. As the weeks became months, the family settled into a routine. Lyra worked in the settlement, Kalen helped with tasks and learned new skills, and Myra attended school while exploring her creativity. They were still outsiders in some ways, but the humans treated them with respect, including them in meals, games, and community events. Lyra noticed that her children were no longer afraid to speak up, ask questions, or make mistakes. They had learned that mistakes were not punishable by rejection, but were opportunities to grow. The community also helped Lyra with emotional healing. She found friends among the humans, people who listened to her story, who shared their own struggles, and who offered support without judgment. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe sharing her feelings. She spoke about the pain of being rejected by her society, the fear of wandering alone with her children, and the relief of finding a place that welcomed them. The humans responded with understanding and encouragement, helping her see that her value was not determined by the cruelty of others, but by her actions, courage, and love for her children. Lyra also noticed changes in herself. She had spent so long in survival mode, always alert, always wary, always afraid of rejection. Now she could relax, even briefly, and allow herself to dream. She imagined a future where her children would grow up healthy, confident, and kind. She imagined a life where they could contribute to a community that valued them. And she imagined herself not just as a mother protecting her children, but as a person with skills, experiences, and wisdom that could help others. One morning, as the sun rose over the settlement, Lyra sat with Kaylin and Myra by a small stream, watching their reflections in the water. "We have been given a second chance," she said softly. "Our past does not define us. We can choose what kind of life we want to build from here." Kaylin smiled, understanding the weight of her words, and Myra hugged her tightly, her small face filled with trust and love. Lyra felt a deep sense of gratitude for the human traveler who had guided them to this place, and for the community that had welcomed them. She realized that even after rejection, life could offer hope, love, and opportunity. By the end of the first year in the settlement, the family had transformed. Lyra's home was comfortable, filled with warmth and laughter. Kaylin had developed a strong sense of responsibility and leadership, helping others and taking care of his sister. Myra had blossomed into a curious, joyful child, confident in her abilities and eager to learn. Lyra herself had regained her strength and confidence, no longer haunted by the fear of rejection. She had found a place where her family was valued, where kindness and respect shaped daily life, and where she could finally imagine a future filled with hope and possibility.